Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov chess channel and welcome to really one of the most interesting games that have been played this year. We have here the world's youngest grandmaster of all times, Abhimanyu Mishra, battling it out against top grandmaster and former World Chess Championship challenger and the legend of the sport, Boris Gelfand. And this is really spectacular battle because the difference in age between the two of them is 40 years. Really wild stuff. So Boris is now 54 years old and Abhimanyu Mishra is only 14 years old, which is really crazy. And the game that we're following now between the two of them is part of the TePe Sigeman in Co chess event that we have followed also here a little bit on my YouTube chess channel. And the winner of this prestigious chess event is top grandmaster Peter Svidler. Really wild stuff. Peter outplayed many grandmasters in this event, played really solid chess. Congratulations to him. It was a deserved win because he didn't lose any games in this epic chess tournament. So I wanted to also point you out the current ratings of Abhimanyu Mishra in this event. He didn't win it, but he gained many rating points. He is now 2,571 rated, which is really crazy when you think about it hard. He's only 14 years old, so he still of course has room for improvement, but he's already a high rated player. And I still think that Abhimanyu Mishra could have had even a better rating. I think his progress wasn't so good because of the COVID situation, because Abhimanyu could not participate in many chess events. If Abhimanyu would have played maybe 15, 20 tournaments per year, really strong tournaments, then I think he would be already 2,600 rated, and I think he would break the world record of the world's youngest 2,600 rated player for sure. It didn't happen because, as I said, he didn't participate in so many events, but still his progress is going well, I think, and he will be in the next 1 or 2 years even a 2,700 rated player for sure. So let's see now this epic battle of generations. So we have here Abhimanyu Mishra with the white pieces against Boris Gelfand with the black pieces, and Abhimanyu open with the move e4. We have c5 by Boris the Sicilian, knight to f3, knight to c6, and the bishop to b5. The Rosolimo Neshmetinov attack, threatening of course to immediately mess up the pawn structure by giving up the bishop for knight, creating a double pawn structure here on the c file. So e6. So we have kingside castling, knight from g to e7, played by Boris Gelfand. He's not risking anymore this double pawn situation because after bishop to c6, he will eventually recapture this knight with this other knight. So in the game d4, c takes d4, knight to d4, knight to g6. Interesting choice here by Boris Gelfand. The main line and probably still the most progressive line for black is to go with the move a6, then after something like bishop to e2 to break and enter with the move d5, simplify the game, and I think it's a solid game already for black. But Boris spiced up the game with a more aggressive line with the move knight to g6, which breaks a little bit the principles in chess that says that you should not play with the same piece twice. But from this square g6, the knight has more access to better squares on this side of the board, on the white side of the board, on h4 and on f4. So in the game we have bishop to e2, bishop to e7, c4, building the so-called Marozzi bind pawn structure, c4, e4, and with this knight on d4 combined, white is now controlling the d5 square and is slowly but surely trying to make positional progress with the move f4, maybe f5, b3 in some lines, knight to c3. So it's not a tactical line, it's a more positional line when you play this kind of a pawn structure in the center of the board. So in the game kingside castling, knight to c3, Boris plays b6, tries to develop the light square bishop, bishop to e3, bishop to b7, knight to b3. Here Abhimanyu retreats with the knight, and in some lines it's even possible to break and enter here with the move c5, and maybe in some lines even go knight to b5, attacking for the d6 square, or maybe if black pushes the pawn to d6, also maybe the d6 pawn. So in the game queen to c8 was played by Boris Gelfand, f4 by Abhimanyu, and now f5. Here Boris is not allowing any spaces on the king side. He is breaking any attacking ideas here of whites on the king side immediately. He stops the progress, but now Abhimanyu makes here already tiny little inaccuracy in the opening stage. E takes f5, and it seems that nothing spectacular is going on, but look how Boris is playing the game. Boris is such a beautiful attacker. He is this Vasily Vanchuk playing style. these are the old masters. They can trick you really into something wild already because of the e takes f5. Let's see the better maybe line. It's the move e5 because you have more access to the d6 square. As we said in the beginning, this is maybe an obvious target that we're trying to attack. You can have maybe the pawn there, you can have maybe a square there, but it's really an object of white's attack. e5 would be, I think, a good game here for white. But after move e takes f5, here Boris shows now his beautiful attacking skills. He plays now the move knight to h4. He doesn't want to even play e takes f5. He's waiting white to take now on e6, but now after d takes e6, now comes the tricky part. How are you going to defend this position? Because the serious threat here is to play knight to g2 and then you risk a discovered attack here with the move knight to e5. And here, for instance, you try bishop to f3. This is not working. Knight to f3, maybe you get rook to f3, and now knight to a5 is, I think, much better already here for black. The light square bishop is coming into the game. You have problems around the square g2. We will eventually maybe trade off the knight on b3, so here black should actually take over. In order to stay in the game after move d takes e6, white needs now to play a wild line with the move bishop to g4, and Abhimanyu didn't play that. I'm not sure how many of us would even consider this move, allowing even the move knight to g2. Look how dirty already the game is. That's what just because Boris Gelfand produced already wild ideas in the opening stage. Look at this. After move knight to g2, king to g2, now knight to e5 happens. You have to play bishop to f3, knight to f3, rook to f3, and after bishop to c3, the game would transpose probably into a two minor piece versus rook middle game, where of course black could maybe take out also the rook on f3, but also could mess up here the structure on the c file. Bishop to c3 is also an opportunity. So the engine gives here equal chances, but that was the only way for Abhimanyu to make something in this position. But after move d takes e6, he played knight to e4, and this is not good because now Boris plays knight to b4 and he attacks now the knight. The knight becomes an object of the attack, and now the knight is loose here on e4. So look at this, you have to defend now with this strange move, knight to d2. So from this point on, I think Boris Gelfand is taking over. But now Boris makes maybe a slight inaccuracy. He plays rook to d8. A better choice is queen to d7, building just a battery on the d file and getting simply access to the d3 square. Now he played rook to d8, which allowed here Abhimanyu Mishra to control the d3 square, but Boris really never wanted to go, really never wanted to play for the d3 square. He still can play, I think, queen to d7 and knight to d3, but Boris held a wilder idea in mind. He wanted to deliver even checkmate immediately on g7 on g2. Really wild stuff. So you see how with this, let's go really back, because with this move f5 and e takes f5, knight to h4, in which Boris sacrificed the pawn, he created already wild attacking chances, and now he's on the attacking side, and Abhimanyu Mishra has now to defend the position. So in the game a3, now Boris plays a brilliant move, rook to d2, sacrifices the rook for the exchange. Bishop to d2 has to be played. Of course, you cannot play knight to d2, you are vulnerable here around the square g2. So after bishop to d2, bishop to c5, look how a great attacker like Boris is including all of the pieces into the attack. Bishop to c5, again knight to c5 is not working because you get checkmated, so that's why you have to cover now with the rook on f2. If you play king to h1, then we simply pick up here the knight, bishop to e4, queen to e4. You don't have time here to battle for the knight on b4. You get here even checkmated on g2, so this is not working. In these types of lines, you have to play something like bishop to f3, bishop to f3, g takes f3. Now after knight to d3, here black is much better with the two minor pieces against the rook, but these are all weak pawns, and I'm not sure how you're going to defend everything here with the white pieces. So as I said, after move bishop to c5, you have to play rook to f2. You don't have time to secure the king here on h1. So in the game, bishop to f2, king to f2, we have knight to a6, Boris steps back, bishop to f3, knight to f3, g takes f3, and now after queen to c4, the game transposed in this position, in which obviously black has a better activity, but it's an opposite colored bishop's middle game slash end game. this game will reach the fully endgame in the next couple of moves. So after move queen to c4, I'm sure that all of us would love to play this game more from black's perspective, but how to make progress? This knight on e4 is powerful, and this is really an opposite color bishop's endgame. So if this game reaches maybe an endgame in which we have only the bishops on the board and the pawns on the board, then obviously it will be a draw. So that's why we can understand the next couple of moves, I think, very easily, because if we move queen to a2, queen to a2, rook to a2, here Boris played now a beautiful sequence. I'm not saying the sequence is winning, but it's spicing up the endgame, because here Boris found this idea: bishop to d5, the rook has to step back, and now he doesn't want to have this opposite colored bishop's endgame. He plays simply bishop to e4, and he improves now the pawn structure here of Abhimanyu Mishra, but at least he created something. He creates at least some kind of a messed up endgame in which, okay, white has the bishop, but the problem is now that black has again a better activity. Knight to c5 is coming with the threat to play knight to b3, king to e3, and now the rook is coming very, very actively into the game. Bishop attacks the knight, but now with the check, king steps back, and now a very nice idea here by Boris. This was pure calculation, endgame calculation here by him. So as I said, I'm not saying that this is winning here for Boris Gelfand, but this is an endgame that's at least unbalanced, that's at least chaotic, and that's what I think Boris wanted to create here. He didn't want to reach this opposite colored bishop's endgame, which is a good choice, because after bishop to c5, b takes c5, rook to b1 would be very risky because of c4, and then we can even in some lines play the move c3, so then we can maybe have access with our king here towards this pawn, so still a risky choice. So that's why after move rook to c1, now Boris grabbed the pawn. Look at this. He creates at least something. As we said, the king has to play here on e3. Boris takes another pawn. Abhimanyu can also take the pawn, but look at this. Boris takes now another pawn. So we have reached now an endgame in which Boris Gelfand has an extra pawn, but this is still, of course, far away from winning, because typically this endgames are ending with a draw. So if white now plays the game correctly, this should still probably a draw. But let's see now how the endgame went down. So in the game, king to e5, rook to a6 protecting. Now after a couple of checks, Boris drops back to g6. The rook comes here on e7, attacks the pawn on e6, and now finally Boris started to push the pawns. But it doesn't matter. Abhimanyu creates also here a very important passer. He plays now the move f6, h2, f7. We have f8, the promotion, queen to h3, queen to f5, very, very important move, because of course queen to e7 or queen to d6 are leading into lines where you have to trade off the queens. But after move queen to f5, here still Boris immediately traded off the queens, and now he started to push this pawn. Now white needs to be careful. You cannot play immediately the move e6. If you play that, then black will go here with the king on g8, and if you try to push, then we have still access to the e square, so there's no promotion for you. You cannot include the king into the support of the pawn, so this is game over. So that's why great calculations again by Boris Gelfand. He noticed that Abhimanyu has to go first with the king in front of the pawn, so bothering white's pawn is now the issue here for white. In the game, we have now the move a4. Now Abhimanyu has to play the move king to d6. He pushed also the pawn further, and we have now reached this endgame where, of course, Boris Gelfand is up a pawn. And still, this should be a draw if white plays now the game correctly. But let's see now what happened. Here Boris, of course, first delivers a couple of checks. Notice there is also this 50 move rule. If black doesn't push any pawns, doesn't play any pawn moves in the 50 move rule, then of course it's a draw. Then it's immediately called draw. So that's why Boris has to now push the pawn in one particular moment of the game. So after queen to e3, here again Boris delivered a couple of checks. Of course, Abhimanyu Mishra also is trying to deliver checks. But the downside for Abhimanyu is that he cannot trade off queens. If he trades off queens, then the king is too far away from the action. Then it's again a theoretical win here for black. So in the game, queen to h4, again a couple of checks by Abhimanyu. Now here Boris Gelfand improves simply the position of the king. That's really the good part. He plays first with the king towards the other side of the board. He still has time to push the pawn. After queen to f7, now queen to f4, and now finally g5. Now the pawn is rolling. Queen to d5, again a couple of checks here by Abhimanyu Mishra. Also now a couple of checks by Boris Gelfand. But again, interesting here idea, queen to f3, you see, with a couple of checks. Again, here Boris Gelfand is getting closer and closer with the pawn. So we have queen to d1, queen to f1, again a couple of checks by Abhimanyu, nothing spectacular, but now Boris again delivers some checks. After a couple of checks here by white, again Boris is just hiding with the king and also is covering with the queen. Again, I'm pointing out white can never really trade off the queens. If that happens, then it's a winning game for black. So again, Abhimanyu plays a couple of checks, and now after a couple more moves, you see that probably black cannot push even the pawn further. Probably this is still a draw, but you have to be always careful where you're going to play the next couple of checks. So again, after a couple of checks here by Abhimanyu Mishra, now Boris started to deliver checks. After a couple of checks, now comes the first critical moment of the game. Here Abhimanyu played his first mistake here, queen to a8, and the problem is now that Boris Gelfand had this opportunity to play immediately the move queen to d5, and queen to d5 is actually almost here a winning game for black, because after queen to a2, king to a2, you have now this brilliant idea. You can play king to g4, and the bad part for black is here, for white is here, that we can drop back here to the square f4 after a couple of checks here. Now we can have access to the g5 square, and the problem is now there's no good check anymore. You can maybe play here queen to c1, but again king to g4, and in one moment we will eventually start to push the pawn. The problem about this move king to a8 by Abhimanyu Mishra is that this move queen to d5 comes with a check that is supporting the g2 square, so it allows then here Boris Gelfand to push the pawn further. But Boris didn't punish that immediately. He played now the move king to h2. Now again Abhimanyu Mishra is delivering a check. Now comes the move g2, but now the queen is close enough to the king, and again Abhimanyu can deliver here checks. Again, just a couple of checks here by Boris, and also after a couple of checks, now Abhimanyu took over and he is now delivering a check, and again this should be probably a draw. But after move king to g1, Abhimanyu didn't play a check anymore. He should have just continued with the move queen to c5. After comes something like king to f1, again just delivering a couple of checks, and this should probably end with a draw. But after move king to g1 that Boris Gelfand played, here Abhimanyu played queen to d5, and now it's a different story, because after king to h2, queen to d2, now first a check here by Boris Gelfand, king to h1. Notice there is no check on h6. This is now the messed up part here. After the check by Abhimanyu Mishra, queen to g1, we have the promotion. Now after a couple of checks, look at this, queen to h2 is now coming with a check. You have to trade off the queens, and in this position Abhimanyu Mishra resigned. So Boris Gelfand won the game in this epic derby of generations. Really wild stuff. So as I said, the difference in age is 40 years between the two of them. Still Boris has it. Still Boris can play the game. He outplayed, I think, Abhimanyu a little bit in the opening, pushed it to the limits here in the endgame stage, but why not? You see, everyone makes mistakes, and this is the way to go. Abhimanyu Mishra is, of course, in his early career, so he still, of course, has room for improvement, but still, he is awesome. He played so many beautiful games, outplayed also Jorden van Foreest in this event, outplayed many great players, so he has a bright future for sure. So, okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. Interesting ideas of the Rosalimo Neshmedinov attack, of the Sicilian defense, and if you want to see more Abhimanyu Mishra games, you can also check out our coverage so far about his games, about his progress of his career. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and what to say, chess is the best, of course.